Hey, how you going, random stranger? We're back at it with Haibane. I hope you've been doing well since the last time we watched this show. The last two episodes were packed. They were kind of packed full of really important reveals, like a therapy session, which was great to see, but also some confronting, while at the same time comforting themes. There was the theme of sin and guilt. Rakka went from feeling immensely guilty for not being good enough to finally accepting that she deserves to be loved just like everyone else. We saw her go through depression and loneliness. You know, she literally fell into the deepest and darkest pit of depression, but she emerged like a stronger, mentally healthier person thanks to help from, surprise, surprise, the Communicator. The episodes also touched on memories and how they're really intrinsically tied to our identities, as well as a need to let go of certain things. And then finally, I think an important theme that carried through from previous episodes was the importance of having support systems. Rakka realized that she was never really alone, even though she felt like she was. The bird that she found at the bottom of the well, the Toga who helped get her out, and even the Communicator, who we will talk about in detail, just given how much I have slandered his good name in earlier episodes. They all supported her in their own ways. Meanwhile, we have Reki, who continues to isolate herself and is really trapped in this self-fulfilling prophecy of being sin-bound. So yeah, basically there's so much in Haibane that just kind of opens your eyes to what are some very human struggles and tries to give these gentle nudges towards possible ways that people can face those struggles and overcome them. Episode 8 opened with Rakka still kind of in Struggle Town. You know, she was coping with the loss of Ku, but she was also dealing with this full-blown existential crisis, which is kind of really relatable. She was scared of possibly being permanently sin-bound, and remember at this point that she'd only heard of Reki's retelling of what being sin-bound actually means, and Reki had given every indication that there is no getting better from it. She also couldn't remember anything about her past, you know, which left her feeling aimless, nor did she know what her present purpose in Glee was. So to her, the Haibane seemed to just disappear at random. So she was worried that if she does vanish without having accomplished anything worthwhile or meaningful in Glee, then what was the whole point of her existence? What she didn't know even after Ku's flight, but what she learned later, is that the Haibane don't actually disappear arbitrarily. You know, their day of flight is actually a sign that they are emotionally ready to move on from Glee, that they have resolved their inner pain or their darkness and found purpose and meaning in their lives. So just kind of taking all of that into account, and we did touch on this last time too, we have kind of got to this point where we know that the Haibane aren't meant to stay in Glee permanently. You know, it's designed as this temporary haven for them to heal from their traumas, and that's why the Haibane aren't allowed to earn money or own possessions or wear new clothes. You know, Glee is meant to be a stepping stone of a place and not a final destination, which is kind of comforting when you think about it. It means that each Haibane has agency in determining their own readiness to move on from Glee. Their existence in this town does have a purpose, and that purpose is to find inner peace, which is actually really wholesome if you think about it. You know, and so the Haibane who left didn't just disappear randomly. They'd actually moved on from Glee after awakening to their purpose or to their value and their own worth as people. It's kind of amazing how clear it is now to me, particularly as, you know, I was this really suspicious sort of conspiracy theorist at the start, kind of comparing the restrictions placed on the Haibane to living under, I think I said it was like living under an oppressive dictatorship. So it just goes to show how once you realize the heavy allegorical nature of a series like Haibane Renmei, everything just kind of makes a lot more sense and you can draw a lot of wholesome lessons from it. Rakka's existential crisis was kind of made worse by how kind, but also how objectifying the townspeople are towards the Haibane. They're seen as these blessed, innocent beings who must be protected at all costs and are also expected to be happy and content at all times. And that really puts pressure on them to live up to this idealized image of them as these walking good luck charms. So it's also this attitude of the townspeople is a little bit sinister. People might be kind to them not purely out of the goodness of their hearts, but because they think the Haibane will bring them good luck. If the Haibane, like Rakka, ever feel depressed or just unhappy with themselves, the townspeople's reverence for them really heightens their feelings of failure and of their low self-worth. Being put on a pedestal like that dehumanizes them, and it kind of glosses over their own inner struggles, as well as the reality that they are these very complex individuals trying to navigate their own mental health and their growth. So kind of just, it's a little reminder, I guess, for us in the real world to, if ever you're tempted to put someone on a pedestal or to, imagine, wow, this person's life is so great, it must be so great to be them, to just kind of put a break on that and be like, well, everyone has their own struggles. Everyone, no matter how great their life looks from the outside, still has their own individual doubts and worries and potential mental health struggles. So yeah, I felt really bad for Rakka, even when she tripped over outside, the man who stopped to help her, when he spoke, his voice sounded like, I don't know, it was demonic in a way. So just goes to show that when you're in that state of mind, when you're so depressed, nothing anyone ever says to you will sound kind. You're kind of paranoid and constantly doubting yourself, and it really distorts everything around you until you can't see clearly anymore. So it was no wonder that Rakka really hit rock bottom in that moment. So in a lot of ways, Rakka's crisis is incredibly relatable to our own human experience. Like Rakka, we're often asking, why is this happening? Why do we lose our loved ones so suddenly? Or why does it feel like nothing we do ever matters? Why do people or society have expectations of me that I seem to be failing horribly at? These things can feel random and meaningless when we're like right in the middle of them, and there's just no clear roadmap for a way out of them. And it's only really in hindsight that we can connect the dots between our losses and our struggles and our challenges and how they ultimately helped us grow as people or helped us shape our purpose in life. But still, the process of discovering that purpose or that self-worth is terrifying because it requires surrendering to the unknown, and it requires just kind of letting go of all this self-doubt and finding a way to think about things very differently. And even if you do have people around who want to help you, at the end of the day, no one else can help you work out your life's meaning except yourself. Just like Rakka had to take the initiative to follow the, kind of intimidating looking crows into the woods and face her fears on her own, and all of her insecurities on her own, it's up to us. Only we ourselves have the means to sort of step outside of our comfort zone and to open up to change, whether that's choosing to seek help for our struggles or choosing to think about things in a different way, or even just choosing to believe that we are worthy, that we do deserve love and happiness, and that our worth as people is not dependent on anything else other than the fact that we're just human beings. Maybe it was because she hit rock bottom that Rakka was ready to try anything to find some answers. And I thought it was interesting that just before she walked deeper into the woods, The bell at Old Home rang and she kind of looked back for a moment, but then decided to head into the woods anyway, showing that sometimes to grow you have to shake off the familiar and just take a risk. Compared to Rakka, on the outside, it seemed like Reki had it together. And I thought that this shot of her with her head out the window and a kind of satisfied smile on her face was striking. She seems to have found her purpose in Glee, caring for the younger Haibane, and is just perfectly content staying there. And why wouldn't anyone not want to stay? You know, it's a beautiful town. Everything is provided for them. It's a very simple and an easy, idyllic sort of life. There's a sense that Glee is a kind of heaven, and Reki hints at that when she talked about how Glee becomes as white as being in the clouds when the snow hits. Initially, she didn't have a choice about being born into Glee, but now Reki wants to just stay there forever, it seems. Then again, maybe Reki's comfort has gone too far. Again, Glee is not meant to be a permanent home. Reki has found a family of sorts that she's scared to lose if she moves on, but it's also the source of her anxiety because she knows that most of them will likely leave her eventually. It was painfully obvious to me in these episodes that Reki wants to hold on to Rakka in particular. There is a kinship there, so it kind of makes sense in that they've both suffered the loss of someone who took care of them, and there was also the shared experience of them being sin-bound, which we'll get into later. Reki is genuinely concerned for Rakka, but the constant reassuring her that she'll always be by her side might also be reflective of an unspoken desire of Reki's for Rakka to stay forever in Glee with her. During the whole sequence after they found Rakka near the woods, Reki firstly expressed suspicion of the Communicator, kind of like how I used to be. You know, she didn't even consider that he'd helped Rakka unburden herself, or maybe she does suspect that he had helped her and she's not actually happy about that. It was like Reki literally missed the forest for the trees. Yes, Rakka might have frostbite, but Reki also completely just glossed over the fact, the very significant and positive fact that a huge weight had been lifted off Rakka's shoulders. It was a case of recognizing physical versus mental health, and Reki chose to overlook the latter. I do wonder if Reki has beef with the Communicator. Maybe when she was a rebel in the past and went to check out the walls for herself, he had some choice words for her that she just couldn't stomach, and it was probably because she just wasn't ready to hear what he had to say. I thought that another indicator that Reki has already been to the walls and didn't have a great experience was her huge reaction to Rakka's cold hands, which was fair enough given, you know, Rakka had been out in the snow without any shoes on for a long time. But the key trigger for Reki's panic was the fact that Rakka had touched the walls. The way that she and also Kana reacted made it seem like touching the wall could be life-threatening. But could it be that Rakka's body is just signaling to her that she is getting closer and closer to her own day of flight? Maybe that's how Ku knew too. The next thing you know, we'll probably see Rakka's halo start to fade. Also, during the scene when Rakka was talking about how her body feels like it's about to disappear, there was this angelic choral music that was playing in the background, the kind that makes you think about heaven. So I think that was also a sign, and because we are getting close to the end of the series, that Rakka is also close to leaving Glee. Compare Reki's really panicked reaction to Rakka touching the walls to the Communicators. He wasn't too happy either that she touched the walls, but neither did he implore her to never ever go near them again, or that, you know, her life was in danger. It was more like, you're not quite ready for that yet, but walk with me and maybe someday you will be. So from all this, we got some intriguing new context about why the Haibane can't go beyond the walls or near the walls until they're ready. The Communicator telling Rakka off does imply that there are serious consequences if they go near the walls before they're ready. What the Haibane sense from the walls seems tied to their mental state. So remember, the communicator had told Rakka that she heard Ku because the walls reflected Rakka's worries about her, almost as if they amplify any inner fears or thoughts that they have. Meaning one has to be free of any inner turmoil or inner self-doubt before going near the walls, or they will just amplify those. They'll make any negative thoughts that the Haibane has even worse, which might cause further damage. Which is probably exactly what happened, I think, when Reki herself went near the walls. You know, her constantly warning the others to stay away, and like her preparing Rakka for the ensuing fever that she'd get from touching the walls felt like she was definitely speaking from experience. Let's just say Reki had touched the walls just after Kuromori had left her. I imagine the walls would have reflected and amplified all of her self-doubt and self-loathing over being abandoned, which would also explain why Reki is haunted by the walls and repeatedly warns others to not go near them. So the rule to not go near the walls makes practical sense. You know, they seem to force a Haibane to confront their mental state. Attempting to pass beyond them prematurely could trigger some sort of mental crisis. Like some people said at the start, when we were just learning about all the rules that the Haibane have to follow, they're like kids who need guidance because they start out lacking the maturity and the capacity to face the wall's power. It's also kind of like how, I don't know why I related it to this, but it's kind of similar. It's like how before you enter a committed relationship, you have to make sure that you are mentally ready to do so. You know, otherwise you're likely to cause damage to yourself and to the other person if you bring all this unresolved emotional baggage and self-doubt and self-loathing into the relationship. So there are definitely certain situations in life where it is best to work on yourself first before pursuing other life milestones or goals. Reki's reaction to discovering Rakka's wings had healed, and not because of the medicine, revealed this complex mix of emotions that's really rooted in her own traumatic past. She seemed genuinely dumbfounded, like it had never crossed her mind that there was any way to treat being sinbound other than by covering it up. Also, by the way, Nemi just asking the real questions, including, is there something medicine can even heal? There was this undercurrent of disappointment at discovering that Rakka had healed. Reki seemed threatened by the implication that being sinbound may not be permanent. On the one hand, it kind of offers a sliver of hope. You know, if Rakka can overcome it, then why not Reki? But it also might end up just as another stab to the heart. You know, maybe Reki is the only permanently sinbound Haibane, and Rakka, whom she thought maybe shared that same condition, actually doesn't, and eventually she'll lose her too once she leaves. We know that Reki suffers from a profound depression that stems from abandonment issues. You know, first when her mentor Kuromori left unexpectedly, and then repeatedly as other Haibane left old home. That lingering trauma has colored her entire perspective on being sinbound. Years of being unable to overcome her struggle has likely reinforced this belief that she alone will always be trapped in Glee. And now, you know, her latest hope that someone else was like her, destined to stay forever in Glee, turned out to not be true. So importantly, Rakka's healing confronted or challenged Reki's belief that sinbound wings reflects an irredeemable soul. For maybe the first time ever, Reki saw that staying forever in Glee might actually be a choice of her own, rooted in her own fear, and not just an unchangeable fact of life. And that's a really jarring reality to have to face. You know, it would have led to some fresh self-doubt and some really uncomfortable questions around what options she has. But these are things that she's not ready to unpack yet. You know, right now, it's just easier for Reki to cling to what she thinks she knows and to cling to this idea that she has no choice but to stay in Glee. It's a rough situation. You know, one of the biggest myths about depression is that it's a choice. when really someone who is experiencing depression is suffering from a disorder that can cause severe symptoms that impact how they feel and think about everything. So I think what Haibane Renmei here was trying to get at is the fact that people with depression can seek help and treatment, but that in the midst of their depression, it can seem like to them that help isn't even an option. Facing emotional wounds with support and an openness to change and growth seems to be the key to becoming like un-sinbound. But Reki's isolation and her constantly refusing help from others means that she has no outside perspective to challenge her own destructive thoughts of being unworthy of love and of being irredeemable and of being alone. There's this very deep refusal to confront her own pain and her own need for healing. So the question then becomes, what was it about Rakka that let her find a way out of her deep anxiety over a seemingly purposeless existence? You know, what sets her apart from Reki? And it was interesting to note that at the start, you know, she was scared of the crows, or rather she was scared to find out what they wanted her to know about her lost memories and her past. But they were persistent, you know, they kept calling out to Rakka, kind of showing her that avoiding her past will only deepen her despair. And so that's maybe why Rakka felt the need to climb into the well that they led her to. Normally, climbing into a deep, dark well isn't quite the logical thing or the safe thing to do, but this isn't a normal situation or show. You know, something supernatural was drawing her in, and the very act of climbing down into the well symbolized Rakka's willingness to take a risk and to open herself up to the unknown. Here's something from Ergo Hash. I find it really cool how Rakka noticed crows in every episode. Intensely, she felt that there was something important with them, but was ignoring them or straight up running away, which reminds me of how oftentimes people know or at least feel what might be the problem or issue that causes them psychological distress, but they choose to ignore it. And I'm not even judging. Often it is a self-preservation coping mechanism. I just state that to me, these crows can serve as a stand-in metaphor for these ever-looming issues that we all know exist but are not ready to face yet. It's very true. And only after Rakka finally descended to the bottom of her well and confronted what she was ignoring did she find some closure. Overall, I appreciate how realistic is the portrayal of depression and mental problems in this show, because it is messy and our feelings can often times be contradictory. The whole wanting to help but then getting sad and jealous when the other person does recover from their ordeal, deflecting, repressing, hiding, going in cycles of destructive thought patterns, searching where the sin lies only to eventually lose your way out. 100% agree. In fact, I think in psychology there is research to show that avoiding memories of past trauma can worsen depression, but it's also, as you say, it's bloody scary to face those fears and super uncomfortable. So in a way, by following the crows, Rakka really had to take a leap of faith to engage with the darker parts of herself and of her past. And again, like you said in your great comment, descending into that well was symbolic of, I think, kind of like exposure therapy. You know, her willingness to confront what she feared the most was what helped her reintegrate all of those repressed memories of her past back into her identity, and I guess her death in her past life. Reintegrate all of that in a healing way. Rakka ends up falling down the well, and that helped trigger memories of her dream where she was plunging down the sky towards Glee, which was the very first scene that we saw in this series. Except this time, she was gripping a black feather during her descent, and she kind of let it go, which seemed to point towards her later acceptance of her own self-worth, and also just letting go of the guilt that she felt over the crow. The sync between Rakka's dream and her falling down the well suggests a direct link to how she died in her past life. The working theory is that she died falling, whether that was falling down a literal well or something else, whether by accident or not, whatever was the case, that was the moment that she was born into Glee. So the well was both a literal portal to Glee and also a metaphorical portal to the memories that had been buried in her subconscious. I thought it was a smart way to not have to make explicit the exact way in which Rakka died. The imagery of her falling down a well was like a clear enough euphemism. I also think that in the story, for the Haibane to remember absolutely every single detail of their dream, or in other words, the way that they died, would have been way too traumatic and too hard to take. Also, the fact that some of the Haibane kids are so young does make me think that it's not necessarily the case that the Haibane are born after taking their own lives. It could also just be kids who died very young accidentally. So at the bottom of this well was a dead bird, which is kind of scary at first, understandably. But instead of being scared, Rakka was instead sad at not being able to remember who the bird used to be. She knew in her heart that it had been someone who had loved her so deeply that they had refused to abandon her even in death. I think part of Rakka's sadness came from her frustration at not remembering this person or who this person was. Without those lost memories of her past life, she couldn't appreciate the full context of why or how this person had selflessly loved her, nor could she reciprocate that love or properly mourn them. And it kind of felt like the ultimate failure to Rakka. The fact that the only thing she could do for them was to give them a proper burial probably didn't seem like enough of a thanks, but that was all she could do to say her final goodbyes in that way. So yeah, even though Rakka found out that she wasn't alone in her past life, it was still bittersweet because that love that she had then is out of her reach now. It was like she regretted not appreciating this person's love for her while she still had them. And at the same time, it was obvious that she struggled to see her own worth back then. And so she was kind of blind to this person's love for her. To her, it was like, why would anyone bother to care about someone like me? It reminds us, again, I'm always bringing it back to what it means for us here in the real world, is just to appreciate the people around you who do love you. And even if it doesn't feel like it, to open your eyes to the love that others do have for you. During the falling scene, it was telling that Rakka told the bird, you can't save me, but thank you anyway. From the perspective of the bird, just to look at it from a more positive view, it showed that it is worth walking alongside someone who is really struggling in life, even if at the end of the day, it's up to the person themselves to decide whether they can heal or want to heal or want to find meaning in their lives. You never know when a word of encouragement or an act of love will get through to them. Someday, like how Rakka eventually saw that she was loved by this person, those acts of love and kindness just might pay off. Also, later during Rakka's therapy session with the Communicator, he gave some pretty great advice for how she should think about her dead companion bird and all this guilt that she was feeling about hurting them by not realizing how much they had cared for her. He came alongside Rakka, offered her his cane, and it was like, take your time, just talk to me about it. And so I was so happy because I've been asking for this for episodes now. I'm so glad that we finally got a proper Glee therapy session. The Communicator helped her understand that the bird had fulfilled its purpose. It showed Rakka what she needed to know, and what she needed to know was that she was deeply loved and had never been alone. This bird was like a guardian spirit who had willingly sacrificed themselves to remain connected to Rakka even after death. So, such extraordinary and such a powerful devotion finally allowed Rakka to recognize her worth. And that's why the bird was proud. You know, it was proud to be able to deliver this last gift of hope to her, the hope that she was and is loved. And this is why also she doesn't have to grieve. The bird, it lived and it died so that Rakka's broken spirit could heal. And instead of grieving, she can celebrate the unconditional love that they had for her and sort of the redemptive nature of that kind of love. Again, it's just like such a wholesome lesson or reminder. And it did make me wonder if each of the other crows in Glee also represent a person or people who care about each of the Haibane in Glee. And whether as soon as a Haibane resolves their inner struggles and or recognizes their own worth, whether the crow that's attached to that Haibane dies too, because like their job is done. Their entire purpose has been to let the Haibane know that they are loved. Anyway, regardless of how that all works, and I don't know if that's ever going to be revealed to us, there is some like circle of life stuff going on here. Rakka's death in her previous life led her to be born into Glee. Now the death of this bird has revived her will to live, and if things go according to plan, it might very well be the start of Rakka's exit from Glee. So there's this just circular sort of motion going on. Okay, so the communicator helped Rakka realize that she can't change the past or magically regain all of her memories. What she can do though is accept this bird or this person's gift of hope and love and meaning. She doesn't have to dwell on the guilt of not having appreciated that person's gift of love back then. Instead, what she can do is she can move forward and go on to live a purposeful life, which is, in a sense, the best way that she can thank those who did care for and love her. It's interesting to compare Rakka's dream in her cocoon to that of Reki's. Rakka had felt alone, but she'd also actually had someone there with her. Reki, on the other hand, can only remember walking alone. And then something horrible happened. She never actually recalled there being another person there with her. And I think that makes all of the difference in the world. Rakka is in a way blessed to have had someone who cared about her like that, like the bird. Not everyone, and maybe not each of the Haibane, had that. The other possibility, of course, is that Reki just hasn't recovered the memories of someone walking with her or being there with her. I think Rakka recovering the memory of and dealing with the loss of her guardian spirit or bird or person offered some relatable insights into like how we grieve and we deal with the loss of loved ones. Number one, it is okay to feel like the full pain of loss rather than to deny it. Rakka really let herself feel the sorrow of her forgotten memories, and she also took the time to bury the bird and to pay tribute to its sacrifice. Number two, it helps to recall the love of those who cared about you. Memories of the bond that we had with our loved ones can continue to enrich our lives even after they're gone. And finally, number three, that it's possible to emerge from grief a stronger person. You know, though a part of us will always be sad about having lost someone close to us, it's in a way helpful to remember that our loved ones would want us to go on living, and that itself can give us strength. I know that sometimes when, you know, at funerals, like when someone comes up to the person who's lost someone and they're like, oh, your loved ones would want you to be happy or would want you to keep going, it can kind of sound superficial and like something that's totally unhelpful. But in another sense, it's also true. You know, the moment that you realize that your loved ones would want you to move on with life and to not forget that you are someone who deserves to live a meaningful life, that can also be a way to turn around this the darkness in your mind that can occur when you're just overcome with grief. It started to snow and Rakka looked happy. And I think she was remembering Reki's words about how snow makes a world look like it's in the clouds, a kind of a heaven. And in that moment, it looked like she had found her own heaven in a way because she was at peace. And that was all because of her discovery that someone had loved her relentlessly until the very last moment. And for that to happen, she must have some worth, or she must have all the worth in the world. And if she was worthy, then she must have a purpose in life, even if she may not know exactly what that is right now. This particular shot of like snow falling off her head at the start of episode 9, for some reason made me think of like baptism or a new birth, so to speak. In a sense, she had shaken off the part of her that didn't think she deserved to exist. As she was thinking about who it might have been who cared for her, coincidentally, a toga showed up and kind of just peeked over the edge. So maybe she can't go back to the person who protected her and loved her in her past life, but there are others here right now who are also willing to help. It was clear that Rakka could not climb out of the well on her own. Just like how when we are at the lowest point in our lives, we often need other people to come alongside us and kind of just give us a helping hand. I also think it was important that she had to actually call out for help, recognizing that actively seeking help is sort of the first step to recovery. And it was only after that she discovered the bird and remembered that someone had cared for her that she even found the strength to yell out for help. Before, she kind of just curled up in a ball because she was so weighed down with the sadness of what she couldn't remember. So the toga was very sweet and offered her his shoulder to climb back up onto the ladder. But just before she started climbing back up, again, Rakka had this little pause to look back at this nameless bird just one last time, maybe still feeling a tinge of regret, but ultimately knowing that she now has a path forward ahead, up out of this well and out of the shadows. Even though she's not supposed to talk to the toga, Rakka took her chances anyway and kind of asked them about Ku. Because that's not too much to ask for, right? Of course she didn't get an answer, but it is a good question. Why aren't the toga allowed to communicate with anyone inside Glee and vice versa? Considering what we know now about how Glee is this transitory way station between life and the afterlife, or whatever lies beyond life, my theory is that the toga's sworn silence is probably just another protective mechanism. Like the walls around Glee, they might possess these like mind-bending secrets about the connection between the mortal world and the afterlife. And some of that knowledge might be too dangerous to have if you're not equipped with the right kind of mindset. Psychologically, it can be damaging, I guess, to reveal these really monumental or these traumatic truths before an individual has the adequate coping frameworks in place. If the Haibane are going to move forward, it's also important that they have an environment where they can remain fully present to focus on their present issues. So revealing too much or finding out too much from the toga might make it so that they fixate on a past that they can't remember and can't change, or they become overly fearful of a future that they're just not ready for. So I kind of like the idea that by staying silent, the toga cultivates a sort of mindful surrender to a very individual journey of self-discovery and of self-healing that every Haibane ideally should go through. So the silence is in fact a teaching tool of sorts. You know, some uncertainty is needed because they need to learn to find their own answers on their own. But too much uncertainty would kind of break their minds as well. After the toga helped Rakka out of the well, she still technically wasn't out of the woods yet, like literally. they kind of left her sort of still barefoot and weak and hurt and still having to find her own way out. And that is something that the communicator explicitly said as well. And I think it was Ergo Hash who kind of mentioned that it was kind of mean of the Togger to not get her shoes from the well too, so that she didn't have to walk in the snow all barefoot. But yeah, now that I'm seeing all of these parallels between Haibane's journey and what it's actually like trying to find your way out of a dark place in your life, I think the fact that Rakka was still a bit lost, even after meeting the Togger and still had to walk her way out of the woods barefoot, emphasized that even though help is available, we are all still ultimately responsible for figuring out our own answers and our own meaning, and just walking our own path towards purpose. When the communicator said that Rakka being rescued from the walls was inevitable, even if they're still not really allowed to interact with the Togger, I thought that that carried a few layers of meaning. On a literal level, it suggests that the Haibane are monitored near the walls and they're guided back towards Oldhome if they stray too close to them before they're ready. Figuratively, it portrays this idea that no one is completely alone in their struggles. Even when Rakka isolated herself or felt isolated, there was always a support system around her, you know, between the other Haibane, the communicator, and others like the Togger and the crows. So I think by saying her rescue was inevitable, it was because of this support. But also Rakka planted the seeds of her own, I guess, saving by being open to discovering her purpose and her value once she'd hit rock bottom. No one is ever a lost cause, and Rakka's story reaffirms that redemption is possible if one is ready for change. Related to this idea that the walls might be patrolled, Carl Knapf had kind of some sobering facts to share. They wrote, an infamous location for suicides in Japan is Aokigahara, a forested area at the base of Mount Fuji. Is this where Kuramori got her name from? And location of the horror movie. In 1999, 74 suicides occurred, the most on record in a given year until 2002 when 78 suicides were found. The following year, a total of 105 bodies were found, making 2003 the deadliest year on record in Aokigahara. The area is patrolled by police looking for suicides. They kind of also wrote about how around the time that Haibane Renmei aired, the suicide rate had spiked to an all-time high, partially caused by the Asian economic crisis of 97-98. I know that Japan has consistently had like a relatively high suicide rate since then, and to know that this anime dealt with these sort of deep-seated, really difficult to confront issues around mental health really increases my respect for it. I think any piece of art that tries to comprehend what makes someone get to that point deserves a lot more views. It was interesting that the communicator first told Rakka to stay back a while he got help for her, but she called out that she was fine. And in the moment that he turned back to look at her, it was like he realized that she'd grown after having come back up from the well, and that she was no longer weighed down by her perceived uselessness. So maybe that is why he allowed her to walk with him, and importantly, to talk to him without having to use the bells on her wings. He may have kind of deemed her ready for a deeper conversation about her struggles. I think other potential reasons why Rakka was able to speak to the communicator in the Western Woods as opposed to before, when she'd met him for the first time in that really fancy garden, is that she was in a state of very visible vulnerability and she needed open, honest guidance. Also, maybe being outside the Haibane Renmei's headquarters meant less of a need to adhere to these formalities and these protocols. So this shift to direct communication with the communicator reflected Rakka's personal growth. and the support that she needed, as well as the communicator just being able to adapt the rules to serve Rakka's best interests. Okay, let's talk about this circle of sin. So previously we talked about kind of like this virtuous circle of life kind of circle. This is not a virtuous cycle. This seems to be one of those vicious cycles. So in the allegorical universe of Haibane Renmei, sin refers to, it seems, number one, these feelings of intense shame or unworthiness that can actually turn their wings black, which kind of symbolizes this corrosion of their spirit. And it seems to be caused by past traumatic events or actions in a Haibane's previous life that they feel overwhelmingly guilty for, even if they can't remember them. And it was confirmed that medicine is just a cosmetic fix for wings that have turned black. I wonder if, I don't know, if the writers had in mind like this booming pills industry and how some people can use medication as a way to cover up deeper problems. 2, sin also seems to refer to a mindset of being irredeemably flawed or cursed or condemned. So a Haibane who is sin-bound believes that they're trapped in glee forever, like Reki. And then 3, sin can also refer to behaviors or these thought patterns that are self-destructive or kind of like spiritually harmful. Now that we've defined like sin, the circle of sin refers to this paradoxical notion that 1, someone who recognizes their own sin has no sin, and 2, that one who believes they have no sin is a sinner. So it's kind of the equivalent of the first step to fixing the problem is recognizing that you even have one in the first place. And that relates to Rakka and Reki in some important ways. Reki was plagued by guilt and this feeling that she deserved punishment for the sin of hurting her loved ones by not valuing her own life and not valuing the love that they had for her. However, the communicator actually absolved Rakka of that sin because of the fact that she recognized it and called herself out for it. Her own self-awareness broke the circle of sin. And there's a sense that overcoming sin involves learning like self-forgiveness and self-acceptance. By contrast, Reki stubbornly believes that she is forever sin-bound, but she can't seem to articulate what sins exactly warrant such harsh self-judgment. She constantly complains, or not complains, just kind of is sad about how others leave her and expresses that abandonment as something being done to her, but she doesn't ever take ownership of her feelings of abandonment. She probably believes that being abandoned is just inherent. You know, it's an inherent, unchangeable part of who she is. And her identity has fused with sort of being a victim of that. And that prevents her from seeing it as something that she has power over. It is less painful to accuse others of abandoning you or just accuse life in general of being abandoned than to consider the possibility that you don't have to feel that way, that people leaving is just a part of life that everyone goes through, and that you actually have the power to not become so deeply depressed over it. So it's hard, you know, taking control of your feelings would require engaging in deep self-examination to understand why she feels abandoned and what she needs to change about herself so as to not be caught in this constant cycle of self-loathing and feeling like everyone leaves her. And after so many years stuck in that sort of mindset, or as the communicator said, you know, just going around and around and around in the same circle, it is understandable why Reki can't see things any differently. You know, it's this lack of self-awareness that keeps Reki trapped in this circle of sin, not to mention her distrust of others and her very self-imposed isolation, which cuts her off from any sort of external help. And that is the paradox of the circle. You know, the more that Rakka spiraled in her guilt and the more that she saw that she had a problem, the more she neared redemption. Whereas Reki's denial of her issues prevents her absolution from this sin. What was cool again about this scene was the use of music. As they were talking about this sort of going around and around in circles, trapping yourself in this circle of sin, the background music was this sort of mellow circus sounding waltz. You know, this 3/4 time piece, which just enhanced the idea of going around and around in circles. I thought the Communicator was a bit of a sweetie. You know, by the time he left Rakka at the edge of the forest, she was able to smile again, which is huge. They'd also had kind of set a date in the future to meet again. So yeah, there you have it, guys. Enjoy that, my complete 180 change of opinion on the commander. Not the commander, I keep calling him the commander. It's the Communicator. I think he's just like a gruff, sweet little old man who wants the best for the Haibane, but is also wise enough to not spoon feed everything to them and to just let them work things out on their own, because that's an important part of finding purpose, right? You need to be able to do it on your own. After Rakka returned to Oldhome, I thought it was interesting how, having been emotionally healed of the idea that she doesn't deserve to exist or to even be in Glee, she's swung the complete opposite way and wants to stay there forever, which Reki, of course, was more than happy to hear. I think what was happening was that making peace with her guilt and not remembering her past brought relief and joy to Rakka, of course, and she felt less urgency to find further answers. You know, having just found meaning and belonging in Glee and found that she had been loved in her past life, you know, the idea of leaving Glee so soon, this new place where she has found love and acceptance, that's frightening. You know, she's built connections with the other Haibane that she doesn't want to lose. And it's just this very human reaction. You know, when we finally emerge from pain, we desperately crave the relief that we get and we fear losing it. But as has been made clear multiple times, Glee isn't meant to be clung to forever. Now that Rakka has faced her sin, the next step I imagine would be to prepare to move on from Glee, even if it means sacrificing this newfound security of hers. Whether she can do that and at the same time also help Reki face her own issues is an open question. Okay guys, episode 10 of Haibane Renmei. Here we go in 3, 2, 1, play. So no cold open. Another thing that I'm thinking about now that I've, you know, just seeing the view of Glee from up high is the townspeople. All of them technically are stuck in Glee permanently too, right? Because as Haibane, they don't have their day of flights. It seems like they're just there to live out the rest of their days. And so there are actually people who, for some reason, unlike the Haibane, don't move on to the afterlife. Again, I don't think we'll ever get the answer to that, like why the townspeople are there in the first place. Maybe they're just all there to create a sense of township for the Haibane. They solely exist for the Haibane. Kuramori. Maybe get a flashback again. That's like, oh yes, we are getting a flashback. That was Reki's birth. Damn, her cocoon was like iced up. That was the bonding. That was it. It's literally the first person she saw that had that look of love in their eyes, and that was it. No wonder why she was devastated when Kuramori left. Did it fall down like Rakka's? Nope. The amount of black that was on Reki's wings, that was that was a lot. Just goes to show how even in her past life, you know, her depression went deep. I feel so bad for her. Oh man, just rude people just staring at this poor kid. He has no idea what happened. People suck sometimes, and headpat. Oh. Oh, so it was the communicator that showed them how to make the medicine. Ooh. Oh no. Oh god. Oh. She got slapped because she was like, why are you mutilating your wings? The parallels between Reki and Rakka are crazy. I mean, I'm glad that Reki did not slap Rakka when she found her with the scissors. Damn. So she got sick because she had to go near the walls to get the medicine, but she couldn't handle the wall's power. Ooh. Oh. Oh man. That is that is the worst thing to say to someone. It's not even her fault. Kids though. I'm sure they obviously they made up. Thank you. Oh, I reckon she'd be feeling relief now, Kuramori, because she's like, eventually I'm going to have to go, but I don't want to leave Reki behind all alone. At least she has other friends now. It's like giving her a purpose. Hey, uh that's what Key said to Reki, to Rakka. I think Kuramori would slap her if she found out that Reki picked up smoking. What is this stressful background music? Oh, she is actually down with a fever. She looks mad. Ooh, take care of your bike. Oh, she's gonna start shit with the communicator. He's like, this child. True. Forget Hyoko. Mm. Yep, she couldn't figure it out. Baraka did. This is part of that thing where you can't spoon feed answers because part of the answer is finding the answer yourself. That makes sense. Like you have to recognize it on your own that you have a problem. What? What happens? It's not about age though. Yeah, it's about mental readiness. Okay. They're all so connected to each other. Well, that puts pressure on Reki then to get her act together, right? I love how the communicator's like, it's not my fault. It's just how things are. Thank you, communicator, for just saying the unspoken out loud. Oof. Ugh, that looks putrid. Okay, so the part about how if you touch the walls, regardless of whether you have actually overcome your internal issues or not, there is still consequences. That part was interesting. It's kind of like, look, these rules have to apply to everyone equally, and so I wish it wasn't that way, but she did touch it. And they have to sort of enforce the rules about not going into any of the walls. Otherwise, any Haibane, even the ones who aren't ready, will go ahead and, you know, suffer for it. What? I thought the fever itself was the punishment, not this public sort of announcement of punishment. Reki's like, you don't know about the communicator. He's the one making you suffer. Reki. Well. Oh, it's so interesting how she figured out like herself and her problems, and she overcome this whole feeling like she didn't deserve to exist and feeling guilty about the bird. But she still has a ways to go. Like she kind of just assumed that it was the medicine that cured her instead of her own thinking her way out of it. And of course, talking to, tough dad. What is this? Man, they look like the same now. Was that a laugh from the communicator? Uh, there's a river inside the walls. It kind of reminds me of like the Greek myth of the river Acheron. You like the river that souls have to travel along to get to the afterlife. They even have a little boat. Again, another protective mechanism. It's kind of like these walls have come some kind of supernatural power and you need protection. Your worst nightmare. It lives here. Okay, so this isn't so much a punishment as a progression of Rakka's role in this town and becoming closer to the walls, which is where you want to be as a Haibane, right? Especially if you want to move on. His names of the Haibane who have left. I mean, she kind of looks like Reki. She's not hiding like her halo and her wings like Hyoko is. It's just okay, they're quite rough around the edges. But they still mean well. Oh, was that the finger? Did he feel bad about last time about making her cry? She can't say anything, right? Hmm, that's kind of nice of them. Oh. She just wants an excuse to bake her donuts using the halo. The halo pan. Huh. Wait, Reki can't go back to the abandoned. Oh yeah, that's right. She's forbidden to interact or go there, something like that. Probably because of her history. Uh, big doubt. Please communicate. this is sort of an example of why knowing too much can actually harm you. Ooh. Wow. I feel like we just got an avalanche of new information and new ideas and potentially new theories that surrounding Glee and what happens to Haibane. The biggest mystery of all, and that's something that the Communicator hinted at, was something happens to a Haibane who stays beyond their allotted period of time. So it's not that they're allowed infinite time to figure out their issues and then have their day of flight. It's that they have a limited time and there's a consequence for taking too long. Or maybe it's just that this beyond a certain point, you're never going to figure yourself out. And so you have to move on to somewhere else. And I was wondering, either they become part of the town, like they turn into a townsperson, and maybe they just become part of the infrastructure. And I imagine if that were the case, that they'd have to have some sort of memory wipe or something. However, remembering back to Nemu's episode and Sumika, it seems like the townspeople themselves are born into Glee as well. So it's not like some of them turned into townspeople from becoming a Haibane. I don't know. The other possibility is that maybe they just become like Hyoko. Maybe the kids at Abandoned Factory are the ones who permanently have to stay a Haibane in Glee. But then that doesn't make sense either, because I remember when Hyoko had his conversation with Rakka, he was kind of asking, okay, did the Haibane who left, meaning Ku, was that from your part of town? Implying that the Haibane from the Abandoned Factory also have their day of flights. They're just kind of separated into different parts of the town. Conclusion is, I have no idea. Other thoughts, I loved seeing Kuromori and how openly and unashamedly just embraced Reki the moment that she was born. By the way, the scene where Reki burst out of her cocoon was kind of horrific, like very different to when they found Rakka, who, when she burst out of her cocoon, it was just water, right? Kind of like pure, unblemished sort of birth. Whereas with Reki's birth situation, there was blood everywhere. She was kind of covered in the grime. Her wings were very obviously polluted, if you want to call it that, or just covered in black. It just all around, it made me feel bad for Reki. Everything that we saw in that episode that Reki had to go through, from being born that way, which implies that in her previous life she was terribly weighed down by some sort of guilt or some sort of disregard for her own worth, to then in Glee having to deal with townspeople just giving her the side eye because of the color of her wings, or people like Nemu who were scared of her initially and just didn't quite know what to do with a Haibane who had such a different condition compared to the rest of them. Also, having things said to her like, oh, if anything happens to Kuromori because she was out picking medicine for you, it's all your fault if she dies. Just things like that were laid on top of Reki's already very fragile sense of self. The fact that she had to, I guess, must have felt incredibly guilty for everything that happened, even though it really was not her fault. And so when you get into a habit of just assuming that everything is your fault, there's no wonder why she's kind of stuck in this rut or this, circle of sin. It's kind of just this automatic reflex to be like, okay, if something bad happened, it was my fault. It must have been my fault. Even the thing with what the Communicator told her about Nemu wanting to see Reki have her day of flight first. You could read that in two ways, right? You could, from Reki's perspective, it's like, well, that's encouragement for me to get my shit together, to start thinking about my own day of flight, to prepare for it, to really face my fears and all that. But the way that she took it was the flip side of that, the negative reading of that, which was, I'm a burden. It's my fault that Nemu doesn't want to leave Glee, and it's all my fault. It's just this, again, just this automatic assumption of guilt and responsibility, even though the communicator had explicitly said, it's not your fault. It's Nemu's problem that she has to deal with on her own. I guess we kind of already knew that she was in a really bad place, but it definitely added context to that. The other thing, if we want to just take it into a more wholesome direction, was the fact that the kids at the abandoned factory, they have connections to the other kids at Old Home, and it's not an essentially, vexed sort of relationship. They actually all kind of support each other. It's just that for whatever reason, they have to be raised separately. Also, it was interesting to find that they actually can foster kids from the other side of town, which again is like, how did that arrangement come to be? Was it they don't have enough resources to take care of so many kids, and so they kind of fob them off to Old Home? Why don't they have enough resources? With all those initial questions out of the way, let's jump straight to episode 11. Here we go in 3, 2, 1, play. Just a bit sad that one of her babies is going. It's interesting that shot of both Dai and Rakka. It's kind of like Reki's dealing with the fact that she has to say goodbye to both of them. It was also kind of nice realizing that it was Kuromori who had given Reki, her job of looking after the younger Haibane. And she still takes it so seriously too. And it did become the thing that made her a little bit more at peace with being in Glee. I wonder though, there's always a double-edged sword to those types of things. It's now also become the thing that makes her not want to leave Glee. Maybe like the river that's in the walls. Is it? To be a kid, just be unaware of all the things that happen when you get older. Saying goodbye to people. It definitely looks like a super foreboding place. And that's the entrance, scrolling through a fence that's been cut. Okay. What, so Hyoko runs the place? Yep, what do we say? Hikari just wanted to use the Halo pan. Ah, this is actually really sweet. I mean, I guess there's the lack of discipline here that the kids really need. Definitely getting a lot more shots of this river and then bridges that go from one side to the other. It's more of that imagery signaling traveling from this life to the next. More tea. Another flashback. I mean, she wouldn't intentionally hurt them, but I don't know. She's so caught up in her self hate that maybe she does things she doesn't mean to. That's not for the best. Oh, oh god. Oh my god. Oh god, okay. Well, see ya. See ya, Rakka. Do not go towards the light. Guys, hear that again, that angelic music that they use whenever you're near a place of, I don't know, ascendance. Can she read these characters? Hey, it's that drop of water from the beginning. Like in the very first episode. She hearing the voices of the Haibane who had left? That is kind of scary because they're no longer there. Mm. He's like, you're gonna leave before her. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So the fact that there was no one in her dream, it was just her, like, on that stone path, and makes a huge difference. But what happens? Do they turn into stone? I'm a little bit apprehensive. I don't know if we're gonna get a happy ending for Reki. Okay. It's almost as if Reki wants to continue punishing herself. It's like, can't have your pie and eat it too. I mean, I do wonder how Rakka is going to help Reki. Because it's like she can't just be like, okay, just recognize that you have a problem and then that will help you escape the circle. Once. She's always assuming the worst in people as well. Hey. Wait, no, that means that. Oh, she's soon to be stuck in Glee. So it's not. Okay, so we've answered the question. It's not the townspeople, the Haibane who stay here. They kind of just go off on their own. And they're not allowed to interact with anyone else for some reason. Mm. Mm. Yeah, not that tough ass. No, she's still here. I mean, human hands. Man, I wonder what she made Hyoko do. Just yet another person to feel guilty over. Kind of like your medicine. Doesn't actually make you better. Because if you don't move on, you die alone. What's that term? It's that Japanese phrase that means like appreciate excuse me, appreciating being in the moment, not worrying about the past or the future, just what is happening right now. She's given up on smokes now. Man, Reki is really, she's just resigned herself to the fate that the communicator told her about. The going off and dying alone and just forever being stuck here. What is she doing? She painting all over her paintings, like her attempts to try and remember her dream. No. Oh my god. No. Didn't you? I mean, that imagery of the paint can lid just like rolling around on its edge is totally what Reki has been doing for the past couple of years. She's just always on edge, just trying to balance having a purpose and a job in Glee that gives her some semblance of joy, but also realizing that, you know, struggling with the fact that she has these blackened wings, which signifies that deep down inside of her there's something that's wrong, that she doesn't quite feel like she's really discovered her purpose. So she's kind of just been stuck in this in-between place. Also, as the communicator said, it's this awful on edge feeling where she is worried that her day of flight will never come, but also not wanting it ever to come because she wants things to stay in a stasis. She wants to stay in Glee and look after the kids and interact with everyone, Nemu and Kana and Rakka, forever. But then just that lid just toppling over it finally and falling flat kind of again just symbolized Reki's realization that nothing lasts forever. She can't continue to lie to herself and to not face the consequence of delaying her day of flight and of not confronting her biggest fears and her, you know, everything, like a fear of abandonment, the blaming herself for everything. Reki, I have no idea what she's going to do, but it does not look great. It is amazing how they were able to portray the inner complexities of a human life and just how hard it can be to be a human through these characters. We already talked about Reki and all of these internal contradictions that she is struggling with and just has no idea what to do with. But also Rakka too, even though she made progress with the dead bird and accepting her past and recovering her memories of the cocoon dream, and now she's actually gotten, I would say, like an upgrade in her job duties. Like she's actually cleaning the temple and working within the walls, just getting really close to the source of the supernatural power. At the same time, she also still has to struggle with the idea that she's going to have to say goodbye to Reki eventually. Whether it's her that leaves Glee first, or whether Reki has her day of flight, hopefully, or whether Reki, you know, goes the way of a Haibane who stays in Glee forever but goes to live alone, which would be an incredibly sad end for her. It's not all, you know, sunshine and rainbows yet for her. If, you know, actually that's sort of the point, I guess. It's that even though you overcome certain challenges, there's always new ones that you have to face. And it's this constant riding of a bike. You have to constantly just face tomorrow, which is totally understandable why Rakka was like, I just want tomorrow to be today, and the day after that, and the day after that. You know, wouldn't it be great if we just had a day that was a great day that went on forever? It sounds like a good idea, but then on the other hand, it's like, well, that means nothing ever changes and you never grow as a person. So yeah, Rakka really struggling with wanting to help Reki out of her circle of sin and her sort of negative cycle of thoughts and this constant collapsing in on herself and blaming herself for everything, but having to accept that if she's going to help Reki, that means that she's going to have to say goodbye to Reki as well. That's just life, guys. It's, you know, life just gives with one hand and then takes away with the other, and that's just our lot, I guess, as human beings. So yeah, that is my verbal vomit for now. I'm sure that as I rewatch the episodes, I will come up with a lot more thoughts and questions to ask. Let me know what you guys think. We are really nearing the end now. In the meantime, I really hope you guys take care of yourselves. As Haibane shows us, it's really important to, you know your worth, know that you're loved. And I will see you guys all for the next either one episode so that we can do a big sum up at the end. But yeah, we'll see. Until then, guys, take care and I'll see you soon.